and to divide us. On both counts, he has clearly failed. Russian troops have been pushed back by the brave Ukrainian forces, and NATO and the European Union have stood united in support of Ukraine. The regime in Moscow wants a different Europe. It wants to control its neighbours, and it sees democracy and freedom as a threat. This will have long-lasting consequences for our security. So we must continue to strengthen the vital transatlantic bond in NATO. We must continue to strengthen the partnership between NATO and the European Union, and we must further strengthen our support to Ukraine. In the world of growing strategic competition, authoritarian actors challenge our interests, values and democratic principles through military, but also political, economic and technological means. China's growing assertiveness and policies present challenges that we need to address. Persistent conflict and instability in our neighbourhood undermine our security and provide fertile ground for both strategic competitors and terrorist groups. Our declaration makes clear that NATO remains the foundation of our collective defence and remains essential for Euro-Atlantic security. It also recognises the value of a more capable European defence that contributes positively to our security and is complementary to and interoperable with NATO. Today's declaration builds on the previous two from 2016 and 2018. Based on these declarations, we have developed concrete actions and we have reached unprecedented progress in our cooperation. We are determined to take the partnership between NATO and the European Union to the next level, to address in particular the growing geostrategic competition, resilience issues and the protection of critical infrastructures, as well as emerging and disruptive technologies, space, the security implications of climate change, foreign interference and information manipulation. Our partnership will become even more important once Finland and Sweden become full NATO members. With their accession, NATO will be protecting 96% of the citizens in the European Union and a higher share of its territory than ever before. We encourage the fullest possible involvement of the NATO allies that are not members of the EU in its initiatives, and we encourage the fullest possible involvement of EU members that are not part of the alliance in its initiatives. So dear Ursula, dear Michel, dear Charles, thank you for your personal commitment and your leadership in taking our cooperation forward. So then I pass the floor to you, President Michel.
Thank you, dear Ursula, dear Jens, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Strong allies make strong alliances. The European Union and NATO, we have evolved and grown in parallel over the years. Our organizations are close, our histories are intertwined. 21 of the 27 EU member states are members of NATO and 23 if we count Sweden and Finland. And EU member states represent the majority of NATO countries. The EU and NATO, we share the same common values of freedom and democracy, and we share the same goal, peace, freedom and prosperity for our people. Russia's war against Ukraine has had two unintended consequences. It has strengthened both our organizations, the EU and NATO, and it has brought us closer together. First, we are stronger. NATO has reinforced its presence in Eastern Europe, and it will have two new members, Sweden and Finland. Putin wanted less NATO, but he has achieved the opposite. He will have more NATO, and he will have more EU. We are also getting stronger. We are speeding up the enlargement process with the Western Balkans, and we took the historic decision to grant candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova and the European perspective to Georgia. And we are enforcing our European defense. For the first time in history, we provided little military equipment to Ukraine through our European Peace Facility just a few hours after the start of the war. So far, we have reached more than 3 billion euros, in addition to the massive military contributions of our member states. Since day one, we have stood by the people of Ukraine with strong military, financial, diplomatic, and political support. Together, the EU and its member states have contributed nearly 50 billion euros. And second, Russia's war against Ukraine has brought the EU and NATO closer together. In fact, we are closer today than ever. Both our organizations have recently raised our ambition by upgrading our strategies for our future security, the EU strategic compass and NATO strategic concept. Our organizations are complementary. NATO is and remains the foundation of collective defense and essential to Euro-Atlantic security, and the EU is determined to contribute more effectively to global and transatlantic security. With today's declaration, we want to take our cooperation to the next level to ensure peace and stability, intensifying our cooperation in new areas, such as protecting critical infrastructure, space, the security implications of climate change, and foreign information manipulation and interference. We Europeans, we want to take more responsibility for our defense, and that also means we enforcing the European pillar within NATO. EU leaders agreed on a clear strategy at our meeting in Versailles last year in March. We developed a strategy to bolster our strategic autonomy and European sovereignty. We agreed to spend more on defense and to strengthen our industrial capabilities by investing more in our defense. Making Europe stronger makes NATO stronger, because strong allies make strong alliances. Thank you again, dear Jens, for your commitment in taking this cooperation forward. You can count on the EU. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then I give the floor to President von der Leyen, please.
Thank you very much, Jens, dear Charles. Indeed, I will never forget this 24th of February of last year, when the three of us were standing here the day that Russia launched its brutal invasion of Ukraine, and it was a very strong signal of unity and of determination. And with the same unity and determination, we're here today again for the joint statement. The eyes of the world were locked on Ukraine's eastern front last year when Russia started the war, but they were also looking at us here in Brussels, scrutinizing our preparation and our reactions. And that day, the world saw how strongly united we were, and we still are, together in the support of the Ukrainian people, but also against Russia's imperial war. Since then, our unity and resolve have only grown stronger. We have already been very close partners, of course, before Russia's brutal war. So we have been testing and coordinating our crisis responses through many exercises we've had together. We have increased our cooperation against cyber attacks, for better military mobility, to fight disinformation, or by addressing the hybrid attacks against Latvia, Poland and Lithuania organized by the Lukashenko regime. I remember a joint travel to the region with you, Jens. By the times we're living in, we know that we have to strengthen and now deepen this more than 20-year-old partnership, because Europe's security is challenged and it is under threat. And this is also reflected in the wish of Sweden and Finland to join NATO. We look very much forward to Sweden and Finland becoming NATO members soon. It's also reflected in Denmark's abolishment of the opt-out clause related to EU defence. All this shows we are aware of the challenge, but we're able to stand up against it. The Russian threats and challenges are the most immediate, but they are not the only ones. We also witness China increasingly attempting to reshape the international order to its benefits, so we must bolster our own resilience. And with this new joint declaration, we are also taking our partnership to the next level. We will deepen our excellent cooperation and expand it to new areas. I would like to look at 4 of them very briefly. The first one is that we will further intensify our work on countering hybrid threats and cyber threats, as well as terrorism. We have already a very close cooperation, but we want to broaden and deepen it. The second is we will step up cooperation on emerging and disruptive technology and space. We do a lot already together, but we can do much more. The third domain is we will address the looming security implication of the climate crisis. Sounds a bit far away, but we are fully aware that with the climate crisis and the extreme weather events like droughts and floods, we see more and more the phenomenon of fostering instability with all the consequences of poverty, of unrest, of instability of whole regions, and therefore this is also a point of focus for us together. And the fourth point, of course, we will strengthen our resilience. The resilience of our societies against malign foreign interference to manipulate information, and crucially, the resilience of our critical infrastructure against all types of attack. The Nord Stream sabotage has shown that we need to take more responsibility for the security of our network infrastructure. And there too, we are aware that the individual countries are responsible for the security of this infrastructure, and for sure we will not share vulnerabilities, but best practices, experiences, this is a field where we can work closer together, and we will intensify the cooperation. The European Union will keep doing everything in its power to support the brave people of Ukraine. We will keep the pressure on the Kremlin for as long as it takes with a biting sanctions regime. We will extend these sanctions to those who militarily support Russia's war, such as Belarus or Iran, and we will be coming forward with new sanctions on Belarus, answering their Belarus' role in this Russian war in Ukraine. We will continue our substantial humanitarian, economic and security assistance to Ukraine as long as it is necessary. And of course, there's the topic to boost European defence capabilities as laid out in the strategic compass. For that, we all know that now we need to ramp up the production capacity of our defence industry, and we need to coordinate the replenishment of military equipment. On all these topics, I looked forward to working with Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson under the Swedish presidency of the Council of the European Union. And of course, we will discuss this and much more tomorrow with you, Jens, when you will be visiting the college. Many thanks.
Okay, we'll start with Financial Times. Over there.
Thank you so much. Henry Foy, Financial Times. A question for President Michel. In October 2021, you said that 2022 would be the year of European defence. You said there would be strengthening of strategic autonomy to reduce reliance on others. Today, you've just signed a document that says stronger European armies are complementary to NATO as the leader in that. Is true strategic autonomy dead, or has it just been put on the shelf for a few more years? And if I may, a question for the Secretary General. We've heard from the Swedes and the Finns that they think they've done enough and Turkey should not ask for more. Do you agree? Does Turkey have a right to ask for more steps, or has Sweden and Finland completely done all they can for membership? Thank you.
D'abord sur la question de la souveraineté européenne, de l'autonomie stratégique, il n'y a pas l'ombre d'un doute, cette souveraineté européenne, cette autonomie stratégique, elle est plus nécessaire que jamais. Et le Conseil européen a bien défini le cadre de cette stratégie autonomique au mois de mars à Versailles, avec 3 piliers qui sont absolument essentiels et que je soutiens pleinement. Premier pilier, c'est la souveraineté énergétique. Je n'en parle pas ici, ce n'est pas l'objet. Nous travaillons beaucoup avec la Commission européenne, avec le Conseil, pour renforcer la capacité d'avoir un vrai marché et une vraie union de l'énergie et la capacité d'être plus indépendant et plus souverain sur ce sujet. Le deuxième point qui a été adopté à Versailles, c'est la défense et c'est la sécurité. Et c'est en cela que le concept stratégique de l'OTAN vient en complément, en appui, en renfort et en cohérence avec un autre document stratégique qui est celui de l'Union européenne qui est la boussole stratégique. Et ça montre bien que nous faisons de ce sujet-là un enjeu extrêmement prioritaire. Et je voudrais, à l'appui, vous indiquer un élément important. Je n'oublierai jamais que dans la nuit du 23 au 24 février, lorsque Volodymyr Zelensky nous a téléphoné, à un certain nombre d'entre nous, c'est l'Union européenne, en quelques heures, qui était capable d'activer pour la première fois la facilité paix pour livrer, première fois dans l'histoire de l'Union européenne, des armes à un pays, l'Ukraine, ce qui, je pense, est en réalité une forme de naissance de l'Europe de la défense de manière extrêmement effective. Et puis le troisième point, c'est la souveraineté technologique, la base économique, ce n'est pas non plus le sujet aujourd'hui. Donc d'un mot, je suis absolument convaincu que l'autonomie stratégique, la souveraineté de l'Europe, c'est-à-dire plus d'influence, plus de résilience, est un pilier fondamental pour l'avenir du projet européen. Et il n'y a pas le moindre doute que c'est en complémentarité et en alliance avec nos amis, nos partenaires et nos alliés, en alliance et au sein de l'OTAN que nous envisageons ce partenariat. Et je l'ai dit à l'époque et je le répète solennellement aussi aujourd'hui, les alliés forts font les alliances solides. Et c'est ce que nous faisons aujourd'hui en confortant à la fois l'Union européenne, en confortant l'OTAN, on conforte l'unité face à cette menace qui est portée contre nous au départ de cette guerre déclenchée par le Kremlin.
On Finland and Sweden and membership of NATO, in NATO, I'm confident that the accession process will be finalized and that all NATO allies will ratify the accession protocols in the parliaments, and that also goes for Turkey. But let me start by just reminding you all about what has happened so far. This has been, so far, the quickest accession process in NATO's modern history. We have to remember that normally accession processes into NATO takes years. Finland and Sweden applied in May last year. Already in July, all 30 allies, including Turkey, decided to invite Finland and Sweden to become full members of NATO, and all 30 allies also signed the accession protocols. And so far, 28 out of 30 allies have already ratified. This is quicker than ever before in NATO's modern history. What paved the way for this historic decision was the agreement between Turkey, Finland and Sweden that was also signed on the margins of the NATO summit in Madrid in July, where they agreed to work more closer together. Finland and Sweden agrees to lift restrictions on arms exports. That has already been done. And they also agreed to work more closely in the fight against terrorism. That is also taking place. They have established a permanent mechanism where they exchange more information and intelligence, and they are working more closely in how to address terrorist threats. Turkey has legitimate security concerns. No NATO ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey, and therefore it is something which is welcomed that the NATO allies, Finland and Sweden, are working more closely on these issues. And then let me add one more thing, and that is that we have to understand that Finland and Sweden, they are in a very different place now compared to where they were before they applied for a NATO membership. Since they applied, several NATO allies, including the United States, have agreed bilateral security arrangements, security assurances for Finland and Sweden. NATO has increased its presence in the region, and as invitees, Finland and Sweden are now participating in NATO's meetings, ministerial meetings, ambassadorial meetings, meetings of different NATO committees, and Finland and Sweden are more and more integrated into NATO's military structures. So it's inconceivable that Finland and Sweden will face any military threat without NATO reacting to that. So I'm saying that I of course see the importance of finalizing the accession process with the ratification in both the Hungarian and the Turkish parliament, but I'm also saying that I'm confident that will happen and that we have already moved a very long way in a short time with Finland and Sweden.
Can I perhaps add a few words on the topic of strategic autonomy? A lot has happened in the last year. And President Michel is right when he said that at the beginning of the year, because strategic autonomy is not only limited to defense, it includes, of course, defense, and strategic autonomy does not say that you do not cooperate. You cooperate with like-minded partners. And the fields in which we have made a lot of progress, the first one is very well known, and this is the vaccine production. So I don't have to explain that, but a big step forward on that we've done during the pandemic. The second field indeed is, or was, our toxic dependency on Russian fossil fuels. We have basically completely gotten rid of it during this year. Coal, completely. We have wind down Russian oil, and more than 80% of the Russian gas has been cut. We have been able, and that's strategic autonomy, to diversify our supply chains to trusted and like-minded partners, and of course to ramp up the own production of energy. We have doubled the deployment of additional renewable energy in the European Union, and this is independence. Renewable energy is not only clean and affordable, but independence. Then we have been working, because we saw a growing dependency on semiconductors, on the CHIPS Act, also a success story. We are preparing the Raw Materials Act, because we see the same challenge what the supply of raw material is concerned, too much focused on one region of the world. And we have developed Global Gateway, also to build up these partnerships with like-minded on the whole energy topic, for example, with the Global South. So a lot has happened in the topic of strategic autonomy. Final point, defense. We are working now with the member states through a task force, jointly with the EEAS and the European Defence Agency, to figure out what are the needs for the replenishment of the stocks, and what does the industry need to cater for it, because it takes two here, not only the demand, but also, of course, the supply side. And this is another step forward in organizing and harmonizing a European common defense answer.
Okay, we'll go to the Ukrainian news agency, Ukrinform.
Thank you for the floor. Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. I want to mention that Ukrainians are grateful very much to both organizations, both to EU and NATO, for practical solidarity. My question is that the both organizations now have the common problem of depletion of military stocks because nobody expected the war in Ukraine of such a scale. My question is, what is the practical cooperation between NATO and EU in filling that gap? And the second part of the question, as the Russians now mobilize reservists and preparing some kind of a future advance, will EU and NATO be able to be in time and prepared to assist Ukraine in this battle, which could be decisive? Thank you.
Maybe I could start by saying that you are right that NATO allies and EU members have depleted their stocks to provide support to Ukraine, and that has been the right thing to do, because this is also about our security, and of course we need to use our capabilities, our stocks, our ammunition to support Ukraine. And I've also been asked, and I've told NATO allies that if they had to choose between meeting all the NATO guidelines on stocks, on capabilities, or to support Ukraine, it's more important to support Ukraine. And therefore, we have been able to provide unprecedented level of support to Ukraine over many months. But of course, when we are depleting our stocks, there is only one long-term solution to that, and that is to produce more. That's also the reason why NATO defense ministers took decisions to increase our stockpiles of munitions and equipment when they met last fall. We have also a long-standing defense planning process and capability targets for each and every ally, including stocks and ammunition. And we are revising them to ensure that we have enough stocks both to protect our own territory but also to provide support for Ukraine. And we are also working with the European Union. We had Commissioner Breton here just before Christmas, and we are on the staff level looking into how we can coordinate our efforts, because this is about ramping up production, of course, in EU, NATO allies, but also in allies that are not members of the European Union. We have engaged directly with the industry, and they are now ramping up production. The aim is, of course, to ensure that we can continue and also strengthen our support to Ukraine, because we have seen that Russia has suffered big losses in Ukraine due to the brave Ukrainian soldiers and the professionalism and the dedication of the Ukrainian armed forces. But we should not underestimate Russia. They are mobilizing more troops. They are working hard to acquire more equipment, more ammunition, and they have shown a willingness to actually suffer but continue the war. And there is no indication that President Putin has changed the overall aim of his brutal war against Ukraine. So we need to be prepared for the long haul. We need to continue to support Ukraine. And again, it is an extremely important message that we are sending today with the declaration, with the two presidents here present with me, that we stand united, NATO and the European Union, in our support to Ukraine.
We're running out of time, but we'll take one third question, which is DPA.
Thank you. Ansgar Hase, German press agency, DPA. A quick question to all of you on the ongoing discussions on weapon deliveries to Ukraine. Do you support member states that are considering sending Western main battle tanks like the Leopard 2 or the Challenger 2 to Ukraine? Or do you fear that there's a huge risk of escalation? Thank you.
I have said many times since the beginning of Russia's invasion in Ukraine that I think that Ukraine should get all the necessary military equipment they need and they can handle to defend their homeland. And this means, of course, advanced air defense systems, but also other types of advanced military equipment, as long as it is necessary to defend Ukraine, because they also defend the basic principles of the UN Charter, of the fundamental rights, and of the international law. And I've said that at the very beginning of Russia's war, and I have still this position, of course.
Let me just add that that what we have seen is that we, NATO allies, EU members, have provided Ukraine also with advanced weapon systems since the war started. And I welcome the new announcements just over the last days by the United States, Germany, France, to also provide new types of armored vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and other types of armor to Ukraine. This is important. There is a constant consultation within the alliance between NATO allies, but also with Ukraine. We will meet next week in Ramstein in the US-led contact group to provide support to Ukraine, and there we will meet with the Ukrainian defense minister to discuss exactly what types of weapons are needed and how can allies provide those weapons. So in addition to armor, We have also provided advanced air defense systems, as President von der Leyen Ursula just referred to, and also long-range missiles with the HIMARS. And all these systems are making a huge difference on the battlefield every day. I welcome the focus on systems, but I think we need to also realize that this is not only about adding more systems, more platforms, more weapons, but also ensuring that the platforms, the weapons we have already provided are working as they should, meaning that we also need to ensure that we provide the necessary ammunition, the spare parts, the training, the maintenance of the systems which are already provided. And therefore, yes, it is important to address what new systems do we need to provide to Ukraine, but also to ensure that all the systems which are already there are working as they should.
There is an aggressor, this is the Kremlin, and there is a victim, this is the people of Ukraine. And I'm very pleased that in the recent weeks and months following the start of the war, the member states were able to deliver more and more military equipment to Ukraine. And like Ursula said, I fully support the same approach. And the European Council many times repeated the call on more military support for Ukraine in order to make sure that they will be able to defend their side, because we know that they are fighting for their future, but they are also fighting for our common values.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we can't take all the questions we have, but this concludes this press conference. Thank you.